So very good morning. Today we discuss some differences between majority differences in Java programming language, nothing but your X and Y topics. We'll discuss some differences. So sit, relax, try to have headphones. Please try to make it as an offline so that you can, whenever you have a time, you just try to listen this topic. Okay. So first thing, we'll discuss some differences between C and Java. As everyone know that C is a procedural language and as well as modular programming language, as well as structured programming language. Whereas Java is your object-oriented program language, whereas C is called as a compiled language, whereas Java is called as an interpreted language. So whenever we get some exceptions in C programming language, nothing but your runtime errors will crashes in C, right? Whereas in Java, what happened, we can handle our exceptions. Whereas C supports preprocessors like as include, as define, everything. Whereas Java doesn't support your preprocessors. And as well as C doesn't support overloading, whereas Java supports your overloading. Whereas C is a user-based memory management, it's generally memory management. C uses pointers, whereas Java doesn't use pointers. C follows top-to-down approach, whereas Java follows bottom-up approach. Whereas it's a low-level language, some authors even say it is a high-level language. Okay, whereas Java is a purely high-level language only. So here default members are public, whereas here default members are private. Okay, and this is not a portable language, whereas Java is a portable, and C is a platform dependent, Java is a platform independent. Whereas your C supports structure and union, Java doesn't support structure and union, but we can use classes. So there will be manual object management where we have here automatic garbage collection, which will be drawback in Java, right? It supports go to statement, Java doesn't support go to statement. Whereas C doesn't support threads, Java supports threads. Whereas C doesn't support multiple inheritance, Java supports your multiple inheritance by using interfaces. Okay, generally it doesn't support multiple inheritance, but it supports by using interfaces. Generally it supports call by value and call by reference. Here we supports only call by value, whereas we can use some call by reference by referring some constructors and objects. Okay. Whereas it supports virtual keyboard and it doesn't support your virtual keyboard. We can use generic pointer. Yesterday we have discussed, right, what is the void use. We can use generic objects. We can use generics. And whereas data hiding using static, here data hiding will be using your private. Allocating memory using malloc, allocating memory by using your new keyword. Java has, C has 32 keywords. Java has 50 plus new packages. Whereas C supports storage classes, nothing but your lifetime and scope of variable, global variables, automatic variables, registers, and all those things. Whereas Java doesn't support storage classes. So that's all about some differences between C and Java. At least whenever your interviewer asks, try to tell at least nearly 6 to 7 differences between your C and Java. Fine. So next, let's come to one more differences. What's the differences between C++ and Java? Again, C++ is also nothing but it's a procedural language with object-oriented programming language, but as well as C or plus also doesn't nothing but it's a platform dependent. Whereas Java is a platform independent. C++ supports go-to statement. Java doesn't support go-to statement. C++ supports multiple inheritance, whereas Java doesn't support multiple inheritance. Again, you need to use a topic called interfaces. C supports virtual keyword. Java doesn't support virtual keyword. Whereas in C++ we can use a friend keyword. Java doesn't have that type of things. Whereas C++ supports operator overloading, whereas Java doesn't support operator overloading. We can perform method overloading. Whereas in C++ supports destructor, Java doesn't support destructor because we have automatic garbage collection. C++ supports pointer, Java doesn't support pointer, but implicitly we can use it. And C++ uses compiler only, Java uses both compiler and interpreter. So that's why it is platform independent. C++ supports structure and unions, Java doesn't support structure and unions. Whereas C++ is mainly used for system programming to develop some operating systems like that. Java is mainly used for application programming. It is widely used in Windows, web-based enterprises and mobile applications. So that's why Java is famous. Okay, so like that, please try to find out the differences between your Java and Python so that you can able to answer. Next, we need to learn what is meant by interpreter and compiler. So generally, interpreter is nothing but what translating step by step, right? And translate programs one statement at a time. Whereas compiler nothing but scans the entire program and translate it into a whole into a machine code. So generally, interpreter takes less amount of time to analyze the source code, but the overall execution time is very slower. Whereas compiler takes large amount of time to analyze, but the source code overall execution time is comparatively very fast. So in interpreters, we don't have any intermediate code, right? So what we generally do by interpreter, we are converting that byte code to our mission compatible code. So whereas your compiler will convert your source code to intermediate code or byte code or mission code, right? Whereas continues translating the in interpreter, it continues translating program until the first error is met, in which case it stops. Hence debugging is easy. It generates the error message only after the scanning the whole program. Hence debugging is comparatively hard, right? So programming languages like Python, Ruby, and Java also uses interpreter. Programming languages like C, C++ uses compiler. Okay, that's the differences between your interpreter and compiler. Just try to have the differences between your interpreter and compiler. Next, let's come to very important thing. Many authors or many interviewers are going to ask a basic question called, so what's the differences between JDK, JRE and JVM? Just try to look at this figure. So generally, what is your JDK or JRE generally stands for means, JDK is a Java development toolkit, right? JDK is a Java development toolkit in which what happens? It's a toolkit. It's a subset of your software development kit, nothing but SDK. So JDK is what used by your developers to write, compile, to test, to debug, to troubleshoot, and creating your own programs. Generally, it is compromise of your what Java, nothing but JRE plus your development tools like what Java, Java compiler, JShell, Java, Java RTU file, Java console, Java virtual machines, JPD, JVMs, IDL, and next for debugging tools, deployment tools, especially for monitoring. This all we are using your JDK. So JDK is what? JDK is a subset of your software development toolkit. So again, we can JDK is also nothing but it's a combination of Java runtime environment plus your development tools. Okay. Next, what is your JRE? JRE stands for your Java runtime environment, right? It's nothing but to provide runtime environment and libraries to the programs, which is getting interpreted by your JVM. So generally, JRE contains your JVM, right? So Java is a platform independent. Why? Because once your Java compiler converting from your source code to intermediate code by using your respective JREs, it is possible to compile once and execute anywhere, right? That's why Vora, how Vora works means write once, run anywhere feature means by using the Java runtime only. If user want to run Java program, he should need JRE install on his machine, but JDK is not necessary. So that's why JRE is available to download Java standard editions also. Now let's come to your final part. What is your JVM? So generally JVM stands for your Java virtual machine, right? It is the critical part, yes. So generally it is a part of your Java runtime environment. If you install JRE, it includes JVM, nothing but if you install JDK for development, which includes JRE, which includes JVM, right? So again, JVM is the interpreter which executes your Java bytecode, right? Java source code is compiled into your Java bytecode by using your Java compilers. Again, these compiled files generally typical have dot class extension, right? Your bytecodes dot class extensions. Again, these dot class files can be shared across different computers and executed by your Java virtual machine. So that's why Java become platform independent and become very famous. Okay. So please do remember these things, what they happening in JVM. So what is your JRE? Just try to look for your this image so that you can understand better. Okay. So fine, this is all about your JDK versus JRE versus JVM. So again, just want to have it stand for Java Development Toolkit. It stands for Java Runtime Environment. It stands for Java Virtual Machine. Generally, it's a toolkit having for compiling, documenting package of Java programs. Whereas your JRE refers to runtime environment in which Java bytecode can be executed. Whereas JVM is nothing but it's an abstract machine. It's a specification that provides a Java runtime environment in which Java bytecode can be executed. Whereas JDK is already, as I discussed earlier, it contains JRE plus development tools. It is an implementation of JVM which physically exists. So JVM follow three annotations, especially your implementation and runtime instances. Fine. So these are differences between your JDK, JRE, and JVM, my dear. Let's go to next topic. So again, your access modifiers, we are having default, private, protected, public. Yes. Within a same class, I can use default. Within a same class, I can use private, protected, and public. Within a sub package, nothing but within sub package, I can use default, but I can't use private, whereas I can use protected as well as public. Same package non-classes, I can use default, but I can't use private. Sometimes inner classes I can use inner auto protected. Public, I can use different packages. I can't use both default and private, whereas I can use protected and public. So whereas different packages and classes, I can use only public. Remaining all cannot be accessed. Nothing public is nothing, but we can access the methods, fields, constructors, everything from to everywhere, right? So that's your access modifiers or specifiers. Now, generally, next topic will goes to what are your methods and constructor. So method is nothing but it is used to represent the behavior of an object, like what type of task we are going to perform. So constructors is nothing but it is used to initialize the state of an object. Nothing but what is a constructor generally? Having the same class and method name at the time of object creation, we can initialize our values. And methods should have return type, constructor should not have any return type. And whereas in order to call your methods, we need to create an object. By using that object reference, we need to call your methods, whereas here implicitly it can be invoked. Here, no default method is provided by the compiler, whereas your constructors, a default constructor is provided by the compiler. Yes. So method name may or may not be same, whereas in constructor it should be same. It should be same. Okay. Now generally go to next statements. What is break and continue? So break is nothing but can be used in switch and loops, nothing but to terminate from the breaks, to terminate from the loops. Continue can be used with the loop statements. Okay, it causes it causes the switch or loop statements to terminate the moment is executed. It doesn't terminate the loop, but causes loop to the next iteration generally. Whereas it terminates the innermost enclosing loop or switch immediately. Whereas continue within a loop nested with a switch will cause the next loop iteration to be executed. So that's the differences between break and continue. Even I have discussed same thing in your interview questions very clearly. Just try to check that video also. Now next, generally, what is your this keyword and super keyword? This represents your current class variables, nothing but current instance of a class. Super represents what? The current instance of a parent or base class. Again, this is a keyword which is used to refer your current class method with arguments, current class constructors, current class constructor with arguments. Whereas your super is used to refer your parent class methods, parent class constructors, parent class method with arguments, parent class constructor with arguments. Whereas here it is used to access only current classes, right? Whereas in it is access to parent classes. So generally this should be your first line of a block. Okay. Super must be first line of a block. Got it. Just remember this point. We'll even discuss in the previous video what is this keyword and super keyword and rules of your this and super keyword. Next, what is static and non-static method? Generally, static method or static keyword must be used before the method name, right? So whereas in non-static method, no need to use your static keyword before the method name. So generally it is used to call what your static, because in Java, everything belongs to object, whereas your static method doesn't belongs to object. The static method always belongs to your class name. How you are going to invoke class name dot your static method name. Generally, how we non-static, first we create object. By using that object reference, we call our methods. And they can't access any non-static variables, right, or methods. Whereas non-static, it can access any static method or any static variable without creating an instance of the class. Yes. That's the differences between static and non-static method. So again, we'll come to the main thing. What's the differences between abstract classes and interfaces? Generally, what is an abstract class? Hiding an internal details and showing the essential feature. That is your abstraction. Abstraction can be achieved by two ways. The first way is abstract classes. Another way is interfaces. What is an abstract class? An abstract class can provide complete default code or just the details that have to be overridden. That's it, right? So nothing but we can create methods, nothing but concrete methods, and it should have at least one. What is one abstract? It's not mandated that it should have at least one abstract method. Okay. An interface cannot provide any code at all, just the signatures. It have only abstract methods. In the case of abstract classes, a class may extend only one abstract class, whereas in a class can implement multiple interfaces at a time. Whereas in abstract classes can have non-abstract methods, nothing but concrete methods, whereas all methods of internal interfaces are must be abstract. An abstract class can have any instance variables, means we can give some any local variables, initializations there. An interface cannot have instance variable, means that variables might be final. And next of all, abstract class can have any visibility like public, private, protected, whereas interfaces visibility must be public or none. If we add a new method to an abstract class, then we have an option of providing default implementation, and therefore all the existing code might work. If we add a new method to an interface, then we have to track down all the implementation of the interface and define implementation for the new methods. Generally, abstract class can contain constructors and interface cannot contain constructor. Abstract classes are very fast. Interfaces are very slow because it need to implement every method which is declared in your interfaces. Whereas in abstract classes, no need to extend everything, right? Though you should not need to implement everything of your abstract classes. Whereas in interfaces, you have to implement every method. Okay, that makes you slow. So next, can I use constructors in interfaces? Obviously, I can't use constructors. Can I use constructors in abstract classes? Yes. Can I use static fields? Yes, yes. Can I use non-static fields? I can't use non-static fields because implicitly the fields will be static in interfaces. Whereas in abstract classes, I can use. Can I use final fields? Yes, implicitly again the fields will be your final only. In abstract class also we can use non-final fields. I can't use in interfaces. Yes, I can use in abstract classes. So try to observe private methods, protected method. Can I use abstract? Can I use final? Can I use non-final? Can I use default? So this is all about your interfaces and abstract classes, what we can use, what we cannot use. Okay, just try to observe for 30 seconds. So what you're going to understand about this thing. So next, while going to your topic, so generally we need to discuss what is an error and exception, right? Generally, what is an error and exception? So before going to discuss what is an error and exception, just try to check this image so that you can understand better. So generally, what is an exception and error? These both are subclasses of java.lang.throwable, right? So generally, superclass of your Java will be object, but your exception and error both are the subclasses of your java.lang.throwable classes. So generally we can handle exceptions at runtime, whereas errors we can't handle, right? That's syntactical errors. So whereas exceptions are the objects representing the logical errors that occurs at runtime and makes JVM enter into ambiguity, confusion state, right? Confusion state. And generally the objects which are automatically created by JVM for representing the runtime errors are known as exception. Whereas an error is a subclass of throwable that indicates serious problem that reasonable applicant should not use try and class, right? Must such errors are abnormal conditions that your virtual machine error, linking error, assertion error, stack overflow, out of memory, no class found, incompatible, class change errors, all those things. So while coming to your differences between exception error, if exception occurs generally, we can handle it by using a try and catch. If error occurs, we can't handle it because program execution will be terminated. So generally, as you people know that there are two types of exceptions, right? One is your checked exception, another one is your unchecked exceptions, right? So checked exceptions are the exceptions which are checked by your compiler, whereas unchecked exceptions are the exceptions which are not checked by your compiler, but it will happens in your runtime. So errors are default unchecked exception. Remember this thing. Errors are default unchecked exceptions, whereas exceptions are related to applications where add error and related to environment in which exception is running. So exceptions are of type java.lang type exception, whereas errors are type of java.lang.error. Error will run at some runtime, right? So just try to check what are your unchecked exceptions and checked exceptions. So what is arithmetic exception, class cast exception, null pointer exception, array index out of bound. So we have discussed in the session. So we have discussed, just revise here. Okay, just try to check. So in apart from runtime exceptions, what type of exceptions we have means we have sometime database connectivity issues like SQL exceptions, IO exceptions, parse exceptions. Suppose I want to perform some date conversions, that all called as a parse exceptions, IO exceptions. This will comes as a exceptions apart from your runtime exceptions. So if you want to check your runtime exceptions, I have given a figure here, just try to observe. So what is your runtime exceptions? Okay, next coming to whenever we have discussed try is nothing but generally what where the problem exactly hitting is going to tell by your try. Catch is nothing but what type of problem you are going to arise or you're going to catch it is called as a catch. I think what type of problem it is. Now after that your C++ doesn't support throws keyword whereas your Java supports the throws keyword. Now observe what is throw and throws. Java throw keyword is used to explicitly throw an exception, right? Generally, whenever you got an exception of java.lang.arithmetic exception, what is a customized default message? So java.lang.arithmetic exception, which is occurs by divided by 0. Suppose I want to perform my own exception. Suppose a should be greater than 100, then only I need to accept input. At that time, I can throw my manual exception, right? Explicitly, I can throw an exception that your a should be greater than 300. We have discussed in the programs also. We'll discuss. So just try to observe. Java throws keyword is used to declare an exception. Okay. So generally I have given how to throw your new exception. Suppose I want to have my own customized message, then throw new message, but your message. So generally your exception, nothing but your throws should be attached to your method. Okay. Whereas throw will be in your if conditions or your method. So checked exceptions cannot be properly